Happy New Year and welcome to City Church's On Demand Messages. My name's Josh, I'm the pastor here, and we're so thankful that you're tuning in whenever you're tuning in and wherever you're tuning in from. In fact, if it's your first time, we would love for you to text new to the number on the screen right now. We've got a gift for you and we would love to connect with you. Also, if you need prayer for anything, we would love and be honored to pray with you and for you. You can text next to the number on the screen as well. We are in a series called Habits. We've all got them, some good, some bad, some we wish we could get rid of, and some we wish we could hold on to for the rest of our lives. What we realize and what we've learned is that habits make up such an important part of our daily life and ultimately the trajectory of our life. And so what we're asking the question is, what could changes in small moments of our day-to-day life lead to, and could they lead to a greater momentum in us looking and becoming more like Jesus? We hope that you are encouraged and challenged by the message today. And again, if we can do anything for you, please reach out and let us know.
Over the past couple of weeks, we've been in a series called Habits. I have to tell you something. This has been a great series, especially as we talk about jumping into a new year, January 2021. Let's be honest, 2020 probably came with some different kind of habits, some different kind of routines, and so it's good for us, right, to start here. And in this series called Habits, in week 1, Josh talked about this, that we have to know the who before the do. In other words, we have to know where our identity lies. Before I jump into this and before I get into this, I really need to know, why am I doing the things that I do? Who am I doing it for? What is the identity that I am seeking in these habits? And then in week 2 last week, Josh and Alex was with us last week, did a phenomenal job talking about starting good habits. And so based on who God wants you to become, what habit did you need to create? So hopefully this past week, maybe as you heard from God's word and you heard as they spoke, hopefully you found the ability to start a new habit. If you're online and you started a new habit from last week, just give us a thumbs up. If you're here this morning and you started a new habit, I'm just going to call you out. Raise your hand. Did anybody start a new habit this past week? Okay, we got some that started some new habits. I love to see that. And so here's the great thing, all right? We've talked about this the last couple of weeks, that many of us have similar goals but different results. I love, there's this little cartoon, and there's this wife, and there's this husband, and the husband, they're trying both to lose weight, and the husband drinks Diet Coke, and the wife only drinks water, and then the husband every once in a while cheats, but the wife never cheats. But the husband loses more weight than the wife, and she's just absolutely ticked. And she's like, I don't understand what's going on here, right? Sometimes we all have the same goals, but different results. See, goals don't determine success, though, right? We can all set goals, but those don't determine our success. Systems, right? Those are the things that help us determine our success. It's hard, though, isn't it? Let's be honest. Maybe this week you started a new habit. I started a new habit this week. Out of the 7 days that I was trying to create that habit, I failed 2 of those days. It's hard, right? Because we don't see progress fast enough. We live in a world that we want instant results. I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and just the pure speed of the internet in the last 10 years is nuts. The fact that you can instantly find something, instantly get something right. We're used to these instant results, and so we don't see progress fast enough. And so habits alone are difficult because of that. And sometimes we wrongly conclude, and I have to agree that I've wrongly concluded this, that small, good, or bad decisions don't really matter that much. Have you ever made a decision, right? There's maybe a habit that you develop, and whether it's good or bad, and you just feel like this small thing really doesn't matter that much. But our life is the sum total of small decisions. We've said this, that successful people do consistently what other people do occasionally. And so, like, if we just put that in all categories of life, our physical, emotional, our mental, our spiritual, that successful people in these places, they do consistently what other people do occasionally. The reality is we're all doing things consistently. In the first week, right, we talked about the fact that we're just doing things that we don't even think about, like which pant leg do you put on first? Left leg, by the way. Do we have any left leggers in here online? Any left leggers? I'm a left legger. Which shoe do you tie first? All those things. Do you put on deodorant before you put your t-shirt on or after you put your t-shirt on. Like, those are just the things that maybe we don't even think about that we just do constantly. And so last week we talked about how to implement good habits. Like, good habits, and I get the great privilege today to talk about bad habits. I am so pumped about talking about bad habits this morning. Like, everybody, you want to hear about your bad habits today, right? So here's what we're going to do. In just a minute, I'm going to count to 3, and we're all going to shout our bad habits out. Online, you're going to put yours in the chat, okay? No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to do that to you this morning. Some of you are like ready, like, let's do this. I'm in. Bad habits, let's do it. But I think if we were all real, we all have some bad habits. I don't think anyone would deny that today, that somewhere in our lives there are bad habits. So I did a little research, and I found the top 4 bad habits that were picked up in 2020. Let's just, as we go through these online, just kind of check them off here in person. Check them off in your head a little bit. See if these ring a bell a little bit. The top 4 bad habits picked up in 2020. Number 1, panic eating comfort foods. Guilty, right? Guilty. What's your go-to? Like, when you're in this mode, what's your chocolate chip cookies? That's mine. Like, hands down, chocolate chip cookies is my go-to. I like them hot, room temperature, put them in the fridge, and get them cold. They're even better. I know that's weird. That's my thing. But that's one of the top 4 from 2020. Number 2, social media and TV binging, right? Guilty, right? One of the bad habits that was created in 2020, this consistent going to entertainment, is something that was created more and more in 2020. What's your go-to? Is it Facebook? Is it Instagram? Is it Twitter? Is it TikTok? There's probably some other ones in there. Is it a certain show on Netflix? Like, what is your go-to that you've consistently gone to? Number 3, I'm guilty again. No exercise. I'm just getting hit with all these, right? These are the bad habits that were developed in 2020. And then lastly, I thought this one was just a little bit unique and different, but I totally get this and possess this some in my life through 2020. A total lack of structure. A total lack of structure. Right? Jobs changed, rhythms changed. Kids came home to school. You pulled your hair a little bit. I pulled mine a lot, apparently, right? You hit 2020 and just things changed. And so a lack of structure came into life. All of these things can lead us towards something, right? All of these things can lead towards our health physically, mentally, our relationships, our work, right? A lack of structure can really just unfold in how we work. Our spiritual life, most importantly. So maybe you can agree with me this morning. Maybe you have a bad habit or two. I have a bad habit or 50, to be honest with you. We can all sit together. Let's just find this commonality that we are all here and we have something that we can work towards, something that we can change to be the person that God intended us to be. We find this story of a man in the Bible, and what's so unique about this story is we kind of get to dig in and see where his bad habits took him to the wrong place and kind of learn how he overcome these bad habits. In this story, this man named David, he changes up things in his life a little bit, and what starts as a small decision leads to something way bigger. Something so small that came to a place where it was massive. And the thing is, I'm sure if you asked David about his end result, he would say to you, this is not how I thought it would end up. This is not what I thought this small decision would lead to. Many of us, I think we could agree. Like we would never sit down and look ahead and think, one day my plans will lead me to stress over money. My plans, a small decision will lead me to getting into debt that is overwhelming. That I will become overweight and have poor health. That I will die young. That I will become addicted and it will become something that's out of control so much that I may lose relationships, my marriage, my kids. No one's plans in the beginning, something small leads them and they think that it will end up with a joyless life, no passion, no drive, no vision, and live with regrets. I don't think if any of us looked at the small decisions that we're making we would think that. But here's the thing. We rarely end up at the wrong place because of one bad choice. It's rare for us to make that one small bad choice and for us to end up right away in the wrong place. It's a rare thing. We usually find ourselves, taking one step at a time, one day at a time, creating one bad habit at a time that can lead to larger things in our life. It may be that right in 2020 that you decided to binge watch all of Netflix, right? And so what has that led you to? Like, it doesn't seem like a very big decision, but maybe that has created miscommunication and no communication in your relationships with your spouse, with your kids. Maybe it's kept you from being very fruitful in your life. Those small decisions, sometimes we don't think that they have big results. We usually find ourselves taking that step. In a second, I want to show you this video. And before I show you this video, I want to set it up for a second. In this video, you're going to watch what looks like large dominoes fall. And in this video, the first domino is 0.19685, okay? 0.19685 inches tall. You're going to see the guy actually grab the first domino with tweezers to set it up. That's how small it is. It's only 0.03937 inches thick. The last one that is in this video is 110 pounds and over 3 foot tall. And in this video, what happens is each domino is only 1.5 times bigger than the domino before it. And there's 13 of these dominoes in this video. So what I want you to do is I want you to imagine that first domino is maybe a bad habit that you possess. Maybe that one step, and then just watch as the dominoes fall. So watch the video on the screen. Right? Isn't it crazy that one tiny with tweezers could take down something that's 100 pounds? Like, isn't it nuts to think that something so small? What's really crazy about this, in this video, they give the science. They say if they took the 13 dominoes to 29, the last domino would be the size of the Empire State Building. I mean, right? I don't think that we think that the small things lead us to something the size of the Empire State Building. But it's those small choices that move us towards those things. Because in the moment, right, no one thinks that checking social media can lead me to pornography. That can lead to struggles in my marriage and eventually my marriage being broken and my family broken. No one thinks that the one purchase I make with my new credit card could lead me into thousands of dollars worth of debt. No one thinks that that one choice would take them somewhere, but one small domino could lead to the collapse of a domino the size of the Empire State Building. Last week, we talked about the habit cycle, and we talked about what this cycle looks like. And Josh and Alex did an incredible job talking about how there's a cue, right? There's something we see, there's something we feel, there's a cue, then there's a response. I see the cue, I feel the cue, then I respond to it, and then there's a reward. And in this cycle, things look a little bit different from good to bad habits. Things possess a little bit of a different look. Good habits usually start more difficult, right? Maybe you started, those of you that raise your hand, you started a good habit this week, and it was difficult. There was moments where you were just like, I think I'm going to give up on this. I don't think, whether it's exercise, or I don't think the way I eat, or whether I stay off my phone more, I don't think those things are easy. They look difficult, but the payoff usually comes in the future. Bad habits are the opposite of that, right? There's an immediate perceived benefit, and there are negative results later. Something as small as, right, one purchase on a credit card can have phenomenal things at the end. For David, there were immediate perceived benefits as we talk about this story to the habits that he was creating. So the great thing this morning that we get to do is we get to kind of learn from David how these bad habits affected his life, but also how he got through these. So in 2 Samuel chapter 11, in verse number 1, it's not on the screen, but the first thing we see about David is we know that he was a shepherd, and he was selected by God to be the next king of Israel. And so we also see, if you've heard a story maybe, about David and Goliath. This is that David who defeated the giant and began to set up his life, and began to set up his story. He was one who God picked. He's one who God loved. But in verse 1 of chapter 11, we find that as his men, at this point he's a king, went out to war, and he was supposed to. It was a time that kings went to war with their armies. He decided, he made a step, he made one decision to stay home. What seems so small is going to lead to a path. And so David stays home when he should have been with his army. And verse number 2 is where we pick up in 2 Samuel chapter 11, and verse number 2 through 5. And it says this: "It happened late one afternoon when David arose from his couch," man, I love my couch, "and was walking on the roof of the king's house, that he saw from the roof a woman bathing, and the woman was very beautiful. And David sent and inquired about the woman, and one said, is not this Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite? And so David sent messengers and took her, and she came to him, and he lay with her. And then she returned to her house. And the woman conceived, and she sent and told David, I am pregnant." And so David's small decision to stay back, to not be where he was supposed to be, his one decision, where does it take him? It takes him to this place where he has now got a woman pregnant who is married. And the story unfolds very deep from this point. Many of you maybe know this story. It unfolds, and what happens is David's got to find a way out of this. He's created this, and he's going to find a way out. Have you ever tried to twist your habits a little bit to maybe think, okay, it's not really that big of a deal, so I'm just, I'm going to twist my eating a little bit. It's not really that big of a deal. Maybe you twist it. And so David begins to try to twist, but it leads him to developing even things worse. So the story unfolds deeper as he calls Uriah, who is Bathsheba's husband, back from war. And what he's trying to do is to get Uriah to go to Bathsheba and make it look like he got her pregnant. But here's what Uriah did. Uriah actually sits on the steps of the palace and says, it's not right for me to be here and go be with my wife while others are out to war. So he sits there in front of the castle and says, I'm not going. So David stops there and does nothing else. No, David then brings him into the palace and he tries to get him drunk so that he would go to his wife. Deeper and deeper and deeper, right? What started as this small domino has now begun to grow. And this is where the story finishes in 2 Samuel chapter 11, verse 14 through 15. In the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it by the hand of Uriah. In the letter he wrote, set Uriah, this is Bathsheba's husband, in the forefront of the hardest fighting, and then draw back from him that he may be struck down and die. It blows my mind that David's at a point so much that he actually puts the letter of Uriah's death in his hand. So much that his habit, with the thing that he's created, with one small step of not following through with what was supposed to be the king's decision to go with his army, and now he's putting a death letter in the guy's hand. The story finishes with Uriah dying. We go on to see in this story David bring Bathsheba in and his wife. And what had started as something so small, now a large tower had fallen. The thing that really gets me is when you think about David, when you go hundreds of years later, something happens in the New Testament. So this story is in the Old Testament, and hundreds of years later, we see someone call David this, a man after God's own heart. How? How can a man who did such a thing, who started with something small and finished with murder, how can he even be referred to as a man after God's own heart? Can I stop for a minute? That can happen because of Jesus. And that's coming later, but let's just put it out there right now that can happen because of Jesus. And if you're here this morning, you're saying, Warren, you don't understand the habits that I've created. They are hideous. Can I tell you? Jesus can redeem. Jesus can rescue. You need to know that today. If you're online, you need to know that today. The thing that we see about David when we look hundreds years later and we see him called a man of God, he broke those bad habits. He gives us a map. And here's where I want to take us today. The first way that we can break bad habits is we got to acknowledge it. We've got to acknowledge our bad habit. And I want to give you one of mine. And you're like, that's not a big deal. But I'm going to let you see how it unfolds. One of my bad habits is I love to hit snooze. Where's my snooze people at? Raise your hand. Join me in this. I love hitting snooze. Hopefully when you're done with this, you're gonna like not want to hit snooze anymore. But here's the deal. This is a bad habit for me. For one, I feel like I can hit it and I don't even know I'm hitting snooze. And I wake up like 30 minutes from when I set my alarm and I'm like, I don't even remember that. Like it's blank. I mean, have you ever done that before where you've hit snooze and you wake up like an hour later and you're like, what happened? And you're rushing like crazy, right? Here's the problem for me. I know if I hit snooze and I miss my mark of getting up by 15 minutes, it sets my day into crumbles. You say, Warren, how? It begins by me rushing to get the kids up. And when they don't get up, I get a little bit mad, a little bit stirred in my heart. And before you know it, I am raising my voice. Before you know it, I am asking them, what are you doing? Don't you know we have to get up and go? And the rushing of the morning just begins to stir me up a little bit. And then sometimes I miss my cup of coffee. Oh, shoot. Well, you're in trouble now, right? The caffeine is not there. Have you ever missed your cup of coffee before? I've missed breakfast. Most importantly, I've missed my time with Jesus. I've missed my time of prayer because I hit the snooze button. And what started as a simple habit to not do, a small bad habit has really unfolded in my entire day. You see, we have to acknowledge it. So as I was studying this week, guess what? I acknowledged my bad habit of hitting the snooze button. And so my question for you is, are you willing to acknowledge it? Because you cannot defeat what you cannot define. You can't defeat what you cannot define. And so this morning, if we're not willing to define it, then how are you releasing it back to God? David knew. In the next chapter, after the story that we see, he is approached by a man named Nathan. And this is what he says in 2 Samuel 12:13. David said to Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. I acknowledge it. I see it. And you're saying, Warren, are you trying to tell me bad habits are sin? I believe that they can lead us towards that. You see, my snooze button, it moves me into a place where I'm not the father I should be. Because of a snooze button. And that, for me, is not okay. That is sin that I must acknowledge. So let me ask you, what is the bad habit you need to acknowledge that you're saying, Warren, it doesn't lead to sin. I want you to track it. I want you to follow it. Because here's the thing, we need to be found in the identity of Jesus, right? Becoming more like him, growing closer to him. With the acknowledging it, we must recognize the root of it. You see, when you acknowledge it, I think you have to kind of go backwards because understand our habits are more than just saying no. We must understand the root. Bad habits are not just about forward looking, but also about looking in the past. Our secret bad habits can reveal the true condition of our state of our life. They show us what is actually going on in our hearts and our minds. You see, for me, and this is just being as real as I can be, for me, snooze meant that I didn't have to get up and deal with the day. In 2020, I hit the snooze button a lot because I didn't want to get up and think about the day a little bit. I'll be totally real with you. It reveals our heart. Our habits normally are a way of diverting and soothing ourselves. They can form when we are seeking deep connection but somehow don't find it. Can I ask you this question? Has this past year birthed some of your worst habits because of the pain of loneliness and fear and anxiety? I mean, I say yes to that question. We can all go to great lengths to not feel pain. Overspending, misusing alcohol or food, entertainment, prescription pills, sex, and all manner of things are readily available to us to avoid hurt or hide from our struggles. Like, it's readily available. Ultimately, we're trying to find where our identity lies. Like in those moments, that's what we're trying to find, because we learned it in week 1, right? That our identity shapes our actions. For David, he now realizes that he moved away from his identity in God and he moved into something else. Listen, maybe you need to hear this morning again. Jesus can heal the past. If you've fallen into a habit and you think about the past, I want you to know he can heal the past. So I want you to do something this morning, not in the chat or not out loud. I want you in your mind right now, acknowledge it. What is your bad habit? Acknowledge it right now. Acknowledge your bad habit. What is it? Acknowledging it's a good thing to do, but I want to give you this last piece. Make it difficult to do and remove the cue. Say it with me. If you're online, if you're in person, make it difficult to do and remove the cue. There's 5 major cues for our habits: place, time, mood, moments, and people. These are the 5 things that shape that cue part of our habits: the place, the time, our mood, moments, and people. And here's how it looked for David in his decision. The first thing we see in his life was a place and a time. He neglected his kingship, what he was supposed to do. He stayed home instead of being at war. This is the place and the time. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time. One author said it so well: when we are out of the way of our place and time, we are in the way of temptation. Like when I am out of the way of place and time, I am putting myself right in a situation where I will feed a bad habit. For example, they say that if you want to break the chain of bad foods, of bad habit, don't put cookies on the table, on the counter. As we've been studying the series, you know what I did with our candy jar? I hid that sucker, and I threw the other one in the trash. I was like, I'm not doing this anymore, and I just, in pure anger and rage, threw it in the trash can. I'm being dead serious. I really did. Place and time has so much to do with our cues. And so what is it that you need to do in a different place, a different time? What do you need to move to make that bad habit change? For me, I had to take my phone and put it on the other side of the room. I had to literally move the place of my phone. And 5 days out of 7, I actually got up and didn't hit the snooze button this week. So what is the place and time? The next thing is David's mood. In our passage in verse 2 said, it happened late one afternoon when David arose from his couch. See, David's life had looked a little bit different. We see all through the book of Psalms that David prayed morning, noon, and night. That daily in each space he spent time. The theologians believe that this was a place of idleness for him, that he had dozed away in the afternoon. And he should have been, right, spending time mainly with his troops, or maybe in this moment improving his relationship with Jesus, or doing good for others, doing what he's supposed to do. He used to not only pray right in the morning, in the evening, the night. So somewhere he had stepped away. He had admitted to do so. Maybe he was lonely being away. Maybe he felt guilty. His mood, idleness for him had given great advantage to bad habits. Idleness can do that to us. It can give way to bad habits. See, his mood normally looked like this in Psalm chapter 5, verse 3. Listen to my voice in the morning, Lord. Each morning I bring my request to you and wait expectantly. His mood was a little bit different. And then our moments. This moment was something that I think he would have forever etched in his mind. His eyes had given way to a moment. He goes to the roof, right? He gets off the couch, he goes to the roof, and in a moment he sees this woman. And maybe this moment spurred his guilt of not being at war, maybe from laying around that day. For some reason, this moment, and for us, right, moments, maybe it's a fight with a spouse, maybe it's something with your kids, maybe it's a moment with your boss, maybe it's a moment at work, maybe something has just spurred in you, and so instead of finding the healing in that moment, you move to your bad habit. How can we change those moments? How can we redirect those moments? And lastly is people. I'm really blown away that somewhere in this, David did not have someone say, dude, that girl's married. That's a big no-no. Like, we need people in our life, because here's the thing. Studies show the closer you are to someone, the more likely you are to imitate their habits. the closer you are. Next week, we're going to talk about these relationships. We're going to talk about the importance of these relationships in our habits. Remove the cue to interrupt the action. For me, it was just moving my phone to the other side of the room. And what it's done is set me up better to get up and start my day first thing with Jesus. Have my cup of coffee. And then at the time I should, start getting my kids up with my wife. Remove the cue to interrupt the action. You see, because I think if we work willingly, Colossians 3:23 says, work willing at whatever you do, as though you're working for the Lord. You're working for that identity and not for people. So we find that identity in who He is. It moves us to acknowledge it and make it difficult to do. Can I ask you this morning, do you like the direction your habits are taking you? What identity do they represent? Play it forward, right? 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, and where will that habit lead you? Will it lead you closer to who Jesus is? Maybe you're here this morning and you don't even know Jesus. Can I ask you, are you finding joy in life? Do you find yourself searching in habits for connection, for not feeling lonely? Can I tell you the answer is Jesus? I think even as I ask these questions, there's maybe someone who today feels the weight. I don't like my habit, but I can't help it. I gotta be honest with you, I've said that before. This is just who I am. May you always remember that habits do not control you, but rather through Christ, you control the habits. There's a story of a man, and this man wanted a garden. Like, I really want a garden. But all he had was a small plot, and it was just full of weeds. And so he got to work that day, and he pulled all the weeds out. He got all the soil clear, and then he left it. He came back about a week later, and there they were again, the weeds. They were still there. Frustrated, he does it again in anger. This time he's got a little more force. He digs a little deeper. He comes back a week later, and there's the weeds again. He's furious at this point. So much that he's tempted to just bring in a bulldozer and just take it all up. You see, he had forgotten something. The process had never ended. He'd forgotten that weeds like empty space. You can't clear a garden. You must sow in good seed. The most effective way to stop weeds is not by treating them as they pop up, but by not letting them have any room to grow. So when you take out the weeds, put the good in. Because here's what happens to David. Here's how he releases these bad habits. In Psalm 51:10, this is his heart. Create in me a clean heart, Jesus. Remove the weeds, O God, and renew a right spirit in with me. Clean it out, clear the garden, take it away. And in verse 12, we see this: restore to me, put back, plant, put the seeds, the joy of your salvation, and uphold me with your willing spirit. So may I encourage you that as you move the bad away, that you put in the good, that you plant the good. And so I ask you this question today. Maybe you don't want to try anymore. Maybe you can't handle the disappointment anymore, but I have this hope for you that Jesus Christ can overcome. And so I ask you this question: based on who God wants you to become, what habit do you need to break? Based on who He wants you to become, what is the habit that you need